need to write down all examples that are listed. But if the professor is giving an extended example to demonstrate, let's say, how gravity works, that you want to note down. Okay, so that sort of example that is used to explain a concept, you want to note down, but a list of examples, not really. All right, how about abbreviations? Do we want to use abbreviations? Yes, definitely. Can someone tell me what an abbreviation is in the chat box? Well done, Natalia. Yeah, a small form to say something, a short form, we'd say. So a short way of saying something. Yes, well done, Ruben. Ruben's given a really good example. So he's written the letters U R instead of saying you are. Yeah, so abbreviations are basically just shorthand or using a few letters to represent an entire word. Okay, so you basically want to do that. You want to write a few letters that mean an entire word. And again, this will save you a lot of time. So make sure you use abbreviations. All right, G, include only keywords. Yes, this is super important. So what are keywords? Can someone tell me what are keywords? Important info or words, an important word. Well done, Matteo and 0004. Sorry, your name isn't showing up. So if you put your name in, I'll call it out. Function words. Ah, Sarna, we're so close. I like the fact that you know that there are function and content words, but unfortunately, keywords are content words, not function words, okay? Okay, so keywords basically are usually nouns and verbs, okay? Because everything else that we use in a sentence is more sort of grammar related and it doesn't have a lot of meaning attached to it. So if you want to reconstruct, if you want to remember something, you probably need more nouns and verbs than anything else. Of course, sometimes adjectives and adverbs are important. So there's a comparison going on, like the biggest or like is the slowest, if there's some sort of comparison going on, of course, you might need other elements, but mainly focus on nouns and verbs that have a lot of meaning attached to it. So that will help you sort of reconstruct the audio that you just listened to. All right. So this is basically it. These are the things we have to keep in mind about how to take notes. In next week's class, we'll look at what to note down. But for this class, let's just focus on how to take better notes. We want to keep them well organized. We want to use headings to do this. We want to save time by using symbols and abbreviations. And we only want to include keywords. Okay? Simple tips, but it's really hard to sort of keep doing it consistently. So when you're practicing, make sure you keep doing these things over and over again. Okay, so one way of making abbreviations is to leave out vowels. So if you have a word like prepared, you could just write PRPD and you would still be able to sort of make out what the word means. So I do this a lot, leave the vowels out. Another thing you can do, number 2, is use one or two of the first and final letters. So if it's a word like difficulty, I'd write something like diffy or diff. 3 is to use apostrophes to shorten words. So if the word is government, I would just write gov apostrophe T. I usually do this with suffixes that we use with nouns. So for example, if it's meant, I'll do apostrophe T. If the word ends in ION, then I do apostrophe N. If it ends in ING, I do apostrophe G. So this really saves me time, and I can still understand the meaning of it, but I don't have to write those extra words. Okay, so these are like a few things that you can do to save time when you're taking notes. Okay, now let's go back to the method and see how we can use our note-taking tips to take notes. Because our first step, if you remember, was to listen to the audio and take notes. So I'm going to play this audio for you now, and I want you to take notes. And once you've done that, I'll come back and I'll show you my notes so we can compare. So again, I'm going to disappear for a bit. And I want you to take notes. Here we go.
So let's go back a little in history, and there we can find that the idea of strategy in business owes its origins to two intellectual giants, Bruce Henderson and Michael Porter. Now, Henderson's central idea was what you might call a Napoleonic idea, the idea of overwhelming the enemy. And what Henderson recognised was that in the business world, the more you do of something disproportionately, the better you get at it. And so he found a logic for investing in a show of force or a show of strength in order to achieve competitive advantage. And that was the first introduction of what is essentially a military concept, a military strategy. He introduced it into the business world. Now, Porter agreed with that premise, but he qualified it. He pointed out, and I think correctly, that that's all very well, but that businesses have different components, and each of those components might be driven by a different kind of strategy. So a company or a business might actually be advantaged in some activities, but disadvantaged in others. So Porter formed the concept of the value chain, and the value chain is essentially the sequence of steps with which, shall we say, raw material is transformed into a component, and that component is later transformed into a finished product, which is then distributed, for example. And he argued that advantage accrued at each step, and that the advantage of the whole was in some sense the sum or the average of that of its parts.
All right, how did you go? I know there was a lot of information there, but hopefully you guys were able to take notes. Okay, I'll show you mine now. Here are my notes. So what I like to do is, because I like to keep my notes organized, I usually make a table and I put my main ideas in the left-hand column and my details in the right-hand column. And basically just sort of, and the main idea sometimes is not obvious when you're taking the notes. So I'll fill up my details column first, but I know I probably don't know what the heading would be, but I know what the entire passage is going to be about. So I have all of those details. So sometimes after I've listened to the lecture, then I'll fill in the main idea thing, the main idea column, because then I'll know what those details are all about. So this is usually how I like to take notes. Obviously, you can use a different method. It doesn't have to look the same. There's no one correct way of taking notes. As long as your notes make sense to you and you're able to answer all the questions using those notes, you're good. All right, so let's move on to step 2. Step 2 is to read the question. And the narrator will read this out for you. What does the professor mainly discuss? So when you see something like this, mainly discuss, what is it mainly about? What is the main idea? What is the main topic? So then you know that it's a gist content question. So then start thinking about the more general idea, which is step 3. Step 3 is to think about the overall content. So before reading the answer options, I want you to try to summarize the lecture in one sentence. Okay, and it doesn't have to be like a grammatically correct sentence or anything. Just in your mind, if let's say, for example, your friend missed a lecture and they were like, what was it about? In a few words, how would you summarize it for them? Okay, so I want you to do that. I want you to look at your notes and summarize it in one sentence. I'm going to give you 30 seconds for this. So just put your summary in the chat box. You have 30 seconds. Your time starts now. Okay, I can see a few answers. I think yeah, you're very close. Okay, so here's mine, but obviously this is not, yours doesn't have to look like that. So the concept of strategy was first introduced in business by Henderson and was improved upon by Porter, who put forth the idea of a value chain. So that's basically mine. Step 3 is to eliminate incorrect answer options. So this is the first time that you're reading the answer options. Don't read them before you've thought of the summary yourself, okay? Think about the summary and then read the answer options. Okay, so let's read these. What was the professor mainly discussing? Emergence and evolution of business strategy, techniques to achieve a competitive advantage, importance and relevance of Porter's premise, sequence of steps in a value chain. Which one do you guys think it is? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Quite a mixed bag. We've got some 2s, some 4s. Don't think about your notes at this point. Think about the summary sentence. Sama says 1, 2, 3. What was it mainly about? That's why it's important not to look at the answer options because they can confuse you. Well done, Sama. Yes, Edna, well done. Okay, now I'll show you how I would eliminate other answer options, okay? So emergence of evolution of business strategy. Yes, a lot of you said strategy in business, which is basically the same thing. When you guys made your summary sentence, a lot of it was revolved around strategy in business. So that could be the correct answer. How about techniques to achieve a competitive advantage? Did he discuss techniques to achieve a competitive advantage? He was talking about how she was talking about how Henderson introduced this idea of competitive advantage, but that's not, she didn't tell you how, right? Technique is basically showing you ways to achieve competitive advantage. That was not a part of the lecture at all. So it's definitely not 2. It was not mentioned. Importance and relevance of Porter's premise. Well, that was just one sentence. It was a very minor detail where she says Porter extended on, or he qualified this premise by introducing new ideas to it. And that is not what the entire lecture was about. Only a short part of the lecture was about Porter's premise. So it was a very minor detail. So that cannot be the correct answer because we want to know what the professor was mainly discussing. Steps, a sequence of steps in a value chain. Again, that cannot be it because it was only discussed in the last few lines of the lecture. So it only refers to a small portion of the lecture. And that's why the correct answer is 1, like most of you said. So remember, they'll always give you answer options like these, okay? So all the answer options that they'll give you will have been either mentioned or will be like, a little part of the lecture somewhere. So it'll be like a minor detail or a small part, but keep your focus on overall what was it about. Overall, it was about business strategy. Everything else was related to that. So it was about the emergence and evolution. Emergence is how business strategy was sort of how it came up, how it emerged, and the evolution, how it changed over time. So it was Henderson, he introduced it, so that was the emergence bit of it. And Porter qualified it, he changed it, he added stuff to it. So that is how it evolved. So emergence and evolution of business strategy is basically what encompasses the whole lecture. Okay, so for those of you who chose other answer options, does it make sense now? They make these answer options like this on purpose to confuse you, but keep your focus on the entire lecture, not on small parts and details. Okay, now let's practice. Keep that in mind. It should be about the overall lecture, not just about small bits. I'm going to play this lecture for you. I'll show you the question, give you 30 seconds to answer it, and then I'll show you what the correct answer is. Again, I'm going to disappear for a bit, but I'll be back and I'll show you the correct answer. Here we go.
There's a growing problem throughout the world. Well, actually, there are many, but I want to focus on AMR, or antimicrobial resistance. A UK government report estimates that if we don't reduce antimicrobial resistance, by 2050, hundreds of millions of people will die every year because of AMR. So let's go right back to the start. The discovery of the antibiotic penicillin and its introduction into the practice of medicine in 1941 changed the landscape of medicine. The antibiotic was a life-saving therapeutic which could cure intractable and fatal infections. However, within just 2 years, physicians identified patients infected with resistant bacteria. That is, the bacteria was resistant to the power of penicillin. This new phenomenon was initially viewed as a problem produced by the hospital itself, but an astonishing outbreak in Detroit in the early 1980s completely upended this assumption and ushered in a new era of thinking about the looming spectre of antibiotic resistance, which is perhaps the most threatening form of AMR. Thus, since the 1980s, AMR has been a priority for health authorities worldwide. We need to understand more about it in order to reduce its development and spread.
What is the professor mainly talking about? All right. Well done, Matteo, Hasib, Sama, uh, 0004, Sarnavar, Stefan. Most of you got this right. Okay, it is 3, discovery of antimicrobial resistance. I can see a couple of you chose 4, it ways to reduce the spread of AMR. That is not the correct answer because it was discussed towards the end, and that's probably why you thought that was the main idea. But that was something that she refers to in passing, and she's like, you have to sort of, we need to spend more, or we need to invest more in research so that we can find ways to reduce the spread of AMR. But that was not what the entire lecture was about. Some of you chose 2, effects of the introduction of penicillin in medicine. This was again a very short part. So first she talks about AMR, and then she's like, the whole thing came up because um, we found penicillin, and then she was talking about, it was sort of like a segue into, she's like, let's go back to the very start and talk about penicillin. But that was not what the entire lecture was about. Like I said, it was like a short part of like a short portion of the lecture, but not what the entire lecture was about. So well done. Most of you got that one right. Natalia as well. Hatham. Well done. Okay. So let's quickly review the method before I show you the next one. Remember to summarize first. So first you want to listen to the audio and take notes. Then you want to read the questions, ignore the answer options for now. Just read the question and think about the overall content. Summarize. Summarize the entire lecture into a couple of words, into a sentence, however many words you need to do that. Summarize it, and then look at the answer options and eliminate incorrect answer options. Okay? That'll definitely help you. It'll not confuse you. Okay, let's try a conversation this time. Again, I'm going to disappear for a bit. Make sure you take notes. Here we go.
Next, please.
Hi, my name is Mark. I was sent here by the Student Advisory Office.
Okay, can I see your ID, please?
Sure, here it is.
Okay, Mark, our system is showing that you've been late on your student loan repayments.
Well, I'm actually here because I'd like to change dorms. My current one is too expensive, and with paying my student loan, I just can't afford it, which is why I've been late on my payments. So instead of a single dorm, I'd like to apply for a shared one to save money.
Okay, that's a good idea. The rent will be cheaper and you'll be able to use that towards your loan. But there is a waiting list. I can put you down as urgent and that'll expedite the wait.
Okay, how long will that be?
With the urgent requests, it might not be for another 2 months.
I see. Nothing sooner?
Unfortunately, that's the best I can do.
Okay, thanks.
What is the conversation mainly about? Okay, I can see a few mixed answers again. Well done, Edna and Sarnaver. It is indeed two, changing accommodation. Some of you said one, making student loan repayments. I know when he came in, he said, she said to him that you're late on your student loans, loan repayment. And then he said that I can't afford the apartment I'm living in. That's why I'm late, and that's why I want to change it. So that's when the topic switched to changing accommodation. And that's when he was like, I'm actually here to change accommodation. So that became like the main topic. So even though he came in, it was like probably less than 10 seconds that they discussed student loan repayment. And that was not the main topic. That was just something that she mentioned in passing. So again, a very small part of the entire conversation. Some of you said 3 and 4. 3 and 4 were again related to him changing accommodation. No, actually, three is incorrect. Lowering the rent of his dorm. He never asks for that. He never asked for lowering the rent. He said he can't afford the current rent, and that's why he wants to move somewhere else. That is different from asking someone to reduce the rent, right? Number 4, reducing the waiting period. This was related to changing accommodation, where he says I need another place kind of urgently. And she says, an urgent request will take 2 months. And he was like, can you reduce that? So again, all of this is related to what? Him moving, right? He wants to move, he wants to change accommodation. And that's basically what the entire thing was about. Does that make sense now? Why it's not any of the other options? Okay, great. Okay, now let's look at a gist purpose question. Again, let's start off with the meaning. So again, it's about gist, it's about, the main idea, overall content. So here, but we are focusing on the reason. In the gist content question, it's more about sort of what was the content about. Here, it's about what was the main reason for giving the lecture or having that conversation. So here, the focus is on the reason. Otherwise, it's very similar. The appearance is also very similar. So you've got an image related to the audio, and you have an audio playing in the background.
Hello,
You have the blue bar down there. And then your question shows up. Why did the student go to see the professor? The narrator will read it out. Then the answer options will appear. Okay? Now let's look at the method. Again, this is also very similar to our just content method. Step 1 is to listen to the audio and take notes. But let's see if you guys can remember the note-taking tips that we looked at earlier. So here's a quick quiz for you guys. We'll do this one together. So vowels, do I include them or do I not include them in my notes? Just put a thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no, or a Y or N will do as well. Well done, you guys. No, I will not include vowels. I'll avoid using vowels in my note. This will save me time. So skip vowels. Full sentences. Yes or no? Do I write full sentences? Well done, you guys. No, I want to avoid writing full sentences. I want to make it as short as possible. Only include keywords. Well done again. Yes, I'll only include keywords again to save